digital marketing company called Mode, and I'm delighted to see so many people here in what is obviously a very highly interesting topic for a lot of folks here. A couple of other things in terms of housekeeping. I think most of you folks know that the restrooms are around the corner, and for those who I expect will be coming back for more events here, in case you found trouble parking, there is additional parking in what is called, I think, P3, P4, P5. When you get out of this main level, you go down and curve around. So just keep that in mind for future, because you will probably need it if you come anytime after 6:01. A few things I wanted to cover. The first is, of course, to talk about TiE Seattle itself. We've got a great panel, and I don't want to take too much time, but I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about our chapter and the organization at large, especially since so many of you haven't been here before. Again, another quick show of hands. How many folks are actually in startups or have some aspirations / ambitions of going and starting something or joining a startup in this near future? Well, you came to the right group. This is the place to be. And let me tell you a little bit about why. So TiE Seattle is one of 60-odd chapters of an organization called TiE Global. And all we're about is entrepreneurship, about promoting entrepreneurship. And unlike most other groups that have similar aspirations as we do, we're actually a truly global organization. We have 13,000 plus members spread over, like I said, 60 plus chapters in pretty much all, I think pretty much all the continents. From North America to, we have a bunch in Europe. We also have a very strong presence in India, and that's where the group originates from, but also in other parts of Asia. I'm not sure if we have much of a presence in Africa right now, but that may well be in the works as well. The bottom line is, our organization is all about promoting entrepreneurship, and our approach is to take almost, I was thinking about what's the right way to describe it, and I thought of the phrase cradle to the grave, and I said, grave, probably not the most appropriate thing, especially given the rate at which startups fail. So we're going to think about it from, really helping startups from concept all the way through, getting them off the ground, helping them, fine-tune their ideas. We're getting into the phase where we're actually going to help you raise money and potentially invest money in your startup as well. We have a very strong mentoring program, which is all about our charter members. Charter members, by the way, are a select group of folks who are invited by individual chapters based on their success as serial entrepreneurs or senior executives at companies. The idea being that these are the folks who can mentor people who are actually starting down the entrepreneurship path. In fact, I know we have several charter members here, and I would beg your indulgence in just putting up your hands, please, so that the rest of the folks can know who you are. So these are the folks who you can harass on your way out, in case you have ideas that you want feedback on and other input. But anyway, like I said, so our goal is really about how do we help entrepreneurs in that journey from the start all the way through, hopefully, getting funded and getting successful and so on and so forth. We're a nonprofit, so this is not something we do because we're trying to make money out of it. It's purely because we believe that, most of us have been fortunate in that we've started companies and which have been successful, so we feel like it's time for us to give back. So that's really primarily the motivation that we have around TiE Seattle. So I'd encourage everybody here to really consider joining our group. We have lots of great events like this one that you're here at today. We also do other events of a different nature. For example, we have a monthly networking event every second Tuesday of every month right here in Bellevue, which is called Startup on Tap. And that is actually preceded by something called Startup 101, where we have an experienced entrepreneur come in and talk about some topic around entrepreneurship at a very deep level. It could be everything from how do you raise money to how do you fine-tune a value proposition to how do you choose the right legal advice, etc., etc. So there's lots of very useful, very interesting advice that you can get from our group and from our charter members. So I definitely encourage you to become a part of the organization. I did want to also acknowledge a couple of our sponsors here, and they'll have a couple of things to say in a moment. First of all, Washington STEM is here, and can I see where you are? There you are. So, these folks are sponsors, and we're very grateful to them. And of course, one of our long-running sponsors is the City of Bellevue. And we have been very fortunate to have their support for quite a while, and they let us use these facilities, which I think are very, very fine and a great place to host these events. And unfortunately, the mayor couldn't be here, but John, who's one of the council members, he's here, and I'd love for him to come in and say a few words in just a moment. Just before I get to that. My apologies for giving you the wrong signal there. But I did want to cover a couple of things before I bring John on. The first is, like I mentioned, we have a series of great events, and a couple of them that I'd love for you to take note of and be a part of. February 12th in the Via Vita Cafe in Bellevue, we have our next startup on tap, and like I said, that will be preceded by the Startup 101, so please be there. March 20th, we have another event right here around big data, and I think any of you who are kind of following that trend know that there's a lot of activity going on there as well, so another event not to be missed if you're at all in that space. And before I bring John and a couple of other folks on, a quick call to action. We are always looking for volunteers to join our organization. We have a great team of volunteers who do amazing work. In fact, these kind of events are really organized by our volunteer team. So, if you think we're doing well, it's really all kudos to them. But we have need for more, and there's several areas that you can get involved with. Everything from helping organize events like this, to helping market our activities, to helping organize the mentoring program, so on and so forth. So there's a ton of opportunity, great people that you can work with, great charter members that you can interact with and potentially learn from, etc. And really, you can have a great time. So we'd love for you to volunteer. If you're interested, please come and either see me or Harish, who's he's our executive director of the chapter. Please see us. We'd love to talk to you. We're also obviously always interested in adding to our membership. So if you haven't already signed up when you came in, please lose no time. You can sign up on the way out as well. Yogi, who is probably helping you register, can take care of those details. And finally, we do have a lot of stuff going on. Some of the easiest ways to share that are often through Facebook and LinkedIn. So find us, like us, follow us, and you'll stay abreast. So I did want to now call in John to say a couple of words. And again, we are very grateful to the City of Bellevue for helping us host these events regularly.
Thank you. I'm John Shelmanack, and I'm a City Council member here in Bellevue. Since I did see a lot of hands go up, I can actually, who said that this is the first time you've been to one of these events, I can steal some of the mayor's lines. I'll do that to begin with. First of all, if you've been in this area for a long time, there's sort of a history around Bellevue. It was one of the first suburbs, and it was sort of one of those flight cities, if you will, and Bellevue High was known as Hot Tub High. And a lot of people still think of us as that. We, frankly, are one of the most culturally rich cities in this area. 1/3 of our residents were born outside of the United States. And we look at that as something that is a tremendous strength, because everybody brings their culture, everybody brings their desire to do great into this community. And I think we've made a very wonderful community out of it. And we do see ourselves very much as a global community. So that's all I'm going to say about Bellevue. Welcome to Bellevue City Hall. I do want to say, too, that you're talking about a couple of things tonight that I think are really important for the future. You're talking about entrepreneurship. Now, I would bet if I said of all of the entrepreneurs, how many of you are going to be successful? How many, raise your hand. How many of you are going to be successful? Okay, all those with your hands up, we want you to locate your business here in Bellevue. Now, if you're not going to be successful, there's great spots in Kirkland. We really want to see, and I've had a chance to work on economic development and competitiveness on the regional level. We really want to see this region as being a very competitive region and a very successful region. And whether you're Tacoma or Kirkland or Seattle or Issaquah or across in Bremerton or up in Everett, we know then that the region will be completely successful. So we really work on that because that's really the future of economic competitiveness, are these city regions. I don't even mind it when people say, oh, you're in Seattle. Oh, well, yeah, sort of. The other thing you're talking about is, tonight is STEM. Science, technology, engineering, and math. And you're combining it with education because frankly, one of the top grand challenges in engineering, which I think many of you know about, so things like carbon sequestration, things like reverse engineering the brain, all of these amazing things. One of the others is how do we do advanced personalized learning? So you're going to be talking tonight about, how we teach ourselves, how we teach the future generations, and I too have a day job. This is not a full-time job. I have an opportunity to work with a client who's in a high-end technology business. They pick up your garbage. Okay? Do you think of that as a high-end technology business? But it's what we do with that after we get it. It's looking at it as a resource. It's finding the technologies that will not be cradle to grave. It'll be cradle to cradle. How you create something and then lead it to its next creation. So have a very good time tonight. Enjoy Bellevue. If you get the chance to hang around afterward, we've got some fun nightlife. We'll probably still have some shopping going on. So enjoy yourself, and I'm going to ask Umesh Gupta next, or do you want to do this? Oh, you're going to do the introduction? Great. And again, thank you for being here tonight, and have a great time.
I did want to take another moment to introduce Ling. She's around here. So one of the things that Seattle is doing is to encourage more partnership with like-minded organizations, and one of those is the Seattle Entrepreneurs Group. And I'd like Ling to say a couple of words about that.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ling Zhuang. I'm the board director of Seattle Entrepreneurship Club. Seattle Entrepreneurship Club is a grassroots, volunteer-based nonprofit organization that aims to promote entrepreneurship related to Chinese communities in the Seattle area. Due to our ethnic background, we also naturally become a bridge between China and the United States. We started our club in 2008 with just several of us, and last year we have grown to more than 500 members. Compared to TIE, we are still small and tiny, but as you can see, the entrepreneurship in the Chinese community is really strong. And I'm very glad that I see several member faces here. I noticed that TIE has changed from the name, the Indus Entrepreneur, to Talent, Ideas, and Enterprise, to reach out to the broader audience. Like TIE, we are rooted in the Chinese community, but we also would like to reach out for sharing, collaboration, and work together to build great startups. It's a great pleasure to be a partner of TIE, and I'm really looking forward to strengthening relationship with TIE in the future. If you want to know more about Seattle Entrepreneurship Club, please feel free to talk to me after the meeting. And our website is seattlestartup.org. seattlestartup.org. Thank you. Enjoy the rest.
Thank you, Ling. And I hope you still have some energy left for the actual event of the evening. For that, I want to call in Umesh Gupta. Umesh is actually the driving force behind tonight's event. And I'd like for Umesh to come in and say a few words and introduce the topic for the evening.
Hello everyone. I think we are waiting for the panel to speak, so I won't take long time, but I want to quickly say a vote of thanks to all the panelists for being here. So let's have a vote of thanks. And now, I don't want to take long time, so let's start the event Learning 2020, the future of education for entrepreneurs. Thank you.
So good evening. My name is Shafeen Charania, and I will be your moderator. Before I introduce the panel, I was going to tell you a little bit about myself for about a minute, and then go on and have the panel introduce themselves, and then we're going to get right down to it. There are a few questions that you've already provided us that we will begin with, but very quickly we would love to get to see your hands come up, and we can start a more dynamic dialogue amongst all of us. So I, like some of the people on this panel, have affiliations in this area. I used to work at Microsoft. I left about 3 years ago and have started up a couple of companies focused on education and a couple of other areas as well, and find the marketplace of education a really interesting one. Some of the things that have struck me about education as a place to do business are its size, but more than its size, it's elasticity. It's one of these things where almost any intervention is accepted, considered, and perhaps ignored, because it has a very deep tendency as a system to want to come back to what it was. And that is probably one of the greatest struggles of being an entrepreneur attempting to penetrate this market and add value to it. The other thing that I think is a really interesting struggle in this market is the question of, or is the fact that we're all experts. So I guarantee you everybody in this room has had an education. And that makes you, whether you think it's true or whether it is true or not, it makes you an expert of some kind. And what ends up happening is the opinions of lay experts can sometimes impede the value of actual experts, and that can be a detractor to success as well. There are many other factors. A couple of other things that I wanted to kind of highlight. Education is about, in K-12 in America, about a $600 billion business. It serves about 55 million students. There are 3 million teachers. The IT budgets are probably, and it's hard to get exact numbers, but I'm guessing it's in the 25–30 billion range. That's the technology budget. The bulk of that 600 billion is payroll. But there is a lot of investment in technology. And what we'll discuss in this panel is the role that technology plays, the role that e-learning plays. And e-learning is kind of, according to Wikipedia, defined as, in fact, I'm going to say it exactly. E-learning is the computer network-enabled transfer of skills and knowledge. So it's a very absurdly open-ended conversation. And what I'm going to do now is ask the panelists to introduce themselves, speak for a minute or two about where you've worked or where you work, your role, your thoughts about e-learning in your organization, and your thoughts about e-learning maybe beyond your organization. And then we'll get started with some questions. So I'm going to start over with you. And Sandi, you're part of Washington STEM, who's one of our sponsors, so we thank you for that as well.
My pleasure.
And please.
My name's Sandi Everlove, and I'm the Chief Learning Officer at Washington STEM. And at Washington STEM, we are really passionate about increasing the number of kids that are capable and interested and actually going into and through STEM careers. We have a huge challenge in our state. It mimics the challenge in our country, in that we actually have a lot of jobs sitting there open and ready for the taking. They're exciting jobs, and they're jobs that actually are necessary for our lives. And yet we're not producing students who have the skill set to actually go in and take those jobs on. And so we want to fix that and close that gap. And we're looking at any and all creative and innovative ways to do that. And we need to do it quickly. So that's one of the big challenges I think that we face. I'll talk a little bit later, if we want to, about where we see the role of e-learning in terms of not only closing that gap for our students' skills, but we also can't forget that the people who sit with those kids every day, 6.5 hours a day that we depend on, are teachers. And we oftentimes neglect their skill set. And we actually oftentimes don't use what we know about how human beings learn and apply that to the teachers. We just bypass that and hope that they get it either by osmosis or being bullied or shamed, or that they watch a video and suddenly watching that video is going to make them capable of taking that into the workplace. And so that's our big area right now that we're looking at. It's not just how do you develop skills, but how do you develop them to the point where someone actually uses them every day in a competent way in schools. And we need help.
Kalpit?
So I'm Kalpit, I'm founder of WAGmob. WAGmob provides simple and easy mobile applications for a lifetime of on-the-go learning. We cover all in-market smartphones and tablets, Windows, Apple, Google Android, as well as BlackBerry. WAGmob has more than 750,000 paying consumers. More than 50% of our money comes from outside the US market. WAGmob covers a spectrum of lifetime of learning, school, college, and professional education. So Shafeen earlier talked about e-learning. At WAGmob, we refer to it as mobile learning, on-the-go learning, anytime, anywhere, any place. We believe in snack-size learning. So we think there is a breakfast model, lunch model, dinner model, and snack model of learning. And we are really after the snack-size mobile applications for learning.
Dan?
So my name is Dan Kerns. I'm Chief Architect of Dreambox Learning. I'm probably what you would call a serial entrepreneur. Dreambox is maybe my 5th or 6th startup. We're actually located in the beautiful city of Bellevue, just across the street here. Dreambox is an instructional provider. We teach math in elementary schools, kindergarten through grade 6. Our customers are schools and school districts. It's just, I just have to say, it's the most exciting company and the most exciting marketplace that I've ever been part of, and the most dynamic too.
Tara?
My name is Prakriya. I'm the Senior Vice President for Product Management at GlobalScholar. We have a number of different products, I'd say 10 major products that are really aimed at teachers and students in schools trying to increase student growth. The thing that ties them all together is a strong focus on data and how that data ties between all the various workflows and work streams in that school, so we can focus on personalized learning as well as standards-based education and educator effectiveness. We realize that it's not one solution for all schools, and it really is an a la carte approach for which pieces schools want to focus on. But we think that with all the rich digital content that is coming out there, it all comes together finally in the decisions that teachers, parents, and students need to make on what to do next and what's the right snack size, breakfast size, or other piece of learning that they can go after. And that decision set, we think, is something that we can make a lot easier.
Stephen?
Thanks. I'm Stephen Coller. I'm the Senior Program Officer at the Gates Foundation. I have 2 responsibilities. I spend 100% of my time overseeing the R&D portfolio for K-12, with particular interest in something the co-chairs call web-scale learning. And investments include areas like Khan Academy and Guru. The other 100% of my time I spend co-leading the Shared Learning Collaborative, which will be launching at South by Southwest in March. And will operate as a shared service in the cloud for instructional data, initially on roughly 11 million students across 9 states, which we hope to grow over time. It will operate as a 501c3, so effectively as a utility that hopefully some of the entrepreneurs in this room will be able to take advantage of shortly.
That we
And
certainly want to.
Yes, and we're very happy to have some of our partners here.
GlobalScholar is a partner, yes.
And I would say for us, e-learning, E probably stands for effective. Where, our mission is to ensure that 8% of the audience we aim to impact, lower-income minority children, graduate college or career ready. I think part of the frustration right now is the bulk of solutions that are in the marketplace carry very little evidence of impact on learning or instructional support. We aim to change that, and we recognize we're at the beginning of the journey rather than the end.
Thank you. So thank you all for being here. And as we get started, it was interesting to see that there are very many different points of view of potential service providers to learning on the panel. One of the questions that I had before we started asking them is to ask you, how many of you today have a business that sells something you would call educational products? So a broad number of you. One of the questions that has always struck me that I want to ask the panel is, as you become a company that sells educational products, where is the best place to start selling them? Is it better to start selling it to somebody like the Gates Foundation through whom you create credibility? Is it better to sell it through GlobalScholar, through whom you can be a provider of content that they can then proliferate? Is it good to go, as Dreambox and WAGmob have done, more to the consumer? Or is it through an advocacy engine like STEM, Washington STEM? So I'm going to start at random with Kalpit and ask you, where do you think it works best? And I know where you've started, but where do you think you can get to the market most easily, or to the place of success in sales?
I think our success from day one has mainly come from consumers very closely paying attention to how consumers are rating your applications, what they are saying about it. And later on we realized that there are specific OEMs who are very focused on education market. Like one of our very big success came with an OEM partner. They were looking at education as well as medical industry as a two big vertical where billions and billions of devices can be shipped. So I think traditionally we look at consumers, we look at school, but there are alternatives like OEMs and even telecom operators who have lots and lots of money and who can potentially help you grow.
So Sandi, would you look at, how would you advocate companies if organizations came to you with something? How do you help them get moving towards becoming sellers and having customers?
I think it depends on who's using that. If you're selling to a product like Dreambox, perhaps, where you're looking at helping children, I think Dreambox initially started by selling to parents. Is that right? Because they care deeply and they're going to buy something that will help their child, and then eventually it made its way into schools. I think if you're looking at something where you're trying to help teachers, for example, then you have to go into the school system. And that is a really challenging thing, because when you really think about it, the textbooks that you might use or these things that are being put into classrooms, the teacher isn't buying your product. A school district person is making the decision, but they're not actually the end user. So you could have bought this for me as a teacher. I could try to use it and decide, ugh, I don't like it, and discard it. And it might be that the product was great, but no one gave me the training to use it very well, so I could abandon it quickly.
There's one more level of indirection. It's not only that the person making the decision isn't the person in the classroom. The person who was figuring out the funding, that the person making the decision, that was making that decision on behalf of the person in the classroom, is a completely different person altogether and has a probably more political agenda than anything else that's aligned. So I think it gets very complicated. In some ways, I think this industry is more complicated than healthcare, because I think there's one additional layer added on to the complexity of the whole situation. So if you're going to go into a school, you have to align to all of those, and that's satisfying some almost conflicting goals sometimes.
Yeah. And then I think one other piece, and I think you might have brought it up, Tara, or perhaps it was you, Kalpit, in that when you really think about those products that are going into schools, the people using them actually don't rate them. So I can go on to Epicurious and I can get a ton of ratings about a recipe and decide whether I want to use it or not, because the people are actually cooking it. If it was really great, went on and rated it. If they modified it, they went on and told me how they modified it. But I can't figure out, if I'm a school district, I can't go to an independent kind of consumer report and say, gosh, all those new apps that are out there, what are teachers saying about those apps? Or what are kids saying about those? And what, are they really working? And so there's, I think, also this dearth of actual data. So you have a lot of people saying, my thing is the very best, and trust me, it's research-based and all that. But is it really? And is it really useful? And who's telling you that? And so I think we have a huge challenge and a huge opportunity, because I think rating and reviewing is ubiquitous out there in everything except education. And I think somebody out there, open that door. I'm working on it. I hope some other people will.
So that's a great lead into a conversation I wanted to have Stephen maybe take hold of a little bit, which is a marketplace for learning capability or for learning resources that you may want to participate in, or you may want to take advantage of and collaborate with to create value. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think for entrepreneurs looking at this space, there are a couple of encouraging developments that will help lower their cost and also their time to market and their ability to have measurable impact in the classroom. On the one hand, there's a very good, by the way, there's a very good paper that was written a couple of years old now, but it's still good. Larry Berger, now I'm heading up Amplify Wireless Generation, fast entry, slow exit, which for any aspiring entrepreneur in the edtech market, I would thoroughly recommend they read. It doesn't take long. He really nails the issues that certainly wireless generation and a lot of other companies like it run into as they grow from startup to at least mid-size. Couple of developments. So number one, interoperability. So typical application, I'm getting a bit techy, but typical application developer needs to talk to a variety of source systems in order to make their solution sing. Well, typically the application developer bears the cost of integrating with those source systems. The district may point you to where they're located, but they won't give it to you on a platter. You'll have to bear the cost of that, and you'll bear the challenge of trying to pass some portion of those costs back to your customer base. It's a drawn-out process, and it slows down innovation, because it means on the district side, they can only integrate 1 or 2 apps per calendar year. So the teachers really don't get a chance to test applications in the classroom to determine whether or not they're fit for purpose, which can slow things down. So there are improvements going on in the systems integration space, companies like Clever and LearnSprout, the SLC initiative, that will expose instructional data, subject to controls by the schools and districts themselves, to solution providers, which removes one blockage. The second is a government initiative, which I encourage you to take a look at, called the Learning Registry, which essentially operates. How many of you remember the days of Usenet and CompuServe? I know it's an old crew. There's sort of an enviable subset of people who remember those days, but the notion that you could subscribe to messages on a network is coming back. The government have funded an initiative that will allow users to make assertions about resources on the web. So it will allow users to say, I found this app to be helpful. It will allow them to self-identify. And eventually you'll start to see more of that Yelp-type functionality creeping into the consumption patterns. It's a freely available service that you can access, and we've yet to really see it get tapped because it's only just launched. And so there are organizations such as PBS, the Smithsonian, NASA, essentially all the federal agencies are being now asked to publish their resources using this registry, which means it's a tremendous resource for entrepreneurs and solution providers to take advantage of as they think about marrying what the data might be telling them about where a student is in their learning and the resources that might be fit for purpose given where that child is in their instruction. So I think there are some encouraging developments that will make life a little easier for people looking to enter the space, but we're definitely at the beginning of a shift in the market.
It's a shift in the market that, it's hard to say how it's really going to end up, but certainly we think that there is an opportunity to work with any number of different content entrepreneurs to better tag and identify the types of content that are out there, or the solutions, or their interactive opportunities, which devices it works on, is it appropriate for in a classroom or supplemental, or there are any number of different pieces that we find that content doesn't really self-identify itself as, and so it makes it difficult to really find the right match between the content and what the educational objective was from a teacher or a student perspective. So if I have any advice for especially content entrepreneurs, is figure out how to publish that information about yourself to either the Learning Registry or any other place that you want to be discovered, because that's vitally important information. But in addition to kind of the self-based or the usage-based information on whether or not the recipe worked, I think the other piece that's really important in education is, what about the actual, where the rubber hits the road? Did it actually affect assessment? Did it actually affect student growth and achievement? And so, the tools that we provide are not nearly as directly involved in student learning, but we think that partnerships between tools like ours and the content and the interactive content that's being created can create that marriage of data between what was effective content and for which students, because something that's effective for one may not be effective for another, or may not be appropriate for another, or maybe uses analogies that are about sports that this student doesn't know anything about. So that's important to understand that when we're putting these things together, it's about the student data and the content metadata, all that information coming together, which is why we're so excited about our partnership with the SLC and with the Learning Registry, because we think it's that opportunity to put all those pieces of information together. If we can gather all the information, that's one thing, but we got to still put it together, in that matching algorithm.
So this is an interesting element of education, which is that you have a host of diverse and dynamic kinds of content available that enables a teacher to teach students or a student to teach themselves or whatever combination they're in. And there needs to be a mechanism by which that is tagged and found or made it findable, so that if a parent, a student, a teacher, and particularly a teacher who has almost no time in the world anyway, needs to quickly help a student or a set of students or a group of students, how can they find that content? So that's a really interesting dimension where you would look at the learning registry and the SLC as being kind of crowdsourced places where you can go and see in repositories where you can see different sources of content and then see how audiences, ideally educators, have rated that content in terms of its suitability to solve a particular need. There's another element that has been talked about a little bit, which is this question of, that's a content side, so it could be a textbook, it could be an app, it could be a variety of different things. But there's also this side where, if we think of technology itself, one might argue that in education, technology has had almost a zero value role. If you look at the traditional use of technology in schools, it was, it's something like PowerPoint or a smartboard, which is used in the same way that a textbook or a piece of paper or a transparency was. That's largely mechanizing current process. It hasn't really elevated that current process. And one of the questions I had for a couple of these guys on the panel was, where do we see technology as a mechanism by which education and pedagogy actually evolved and developed to the point where it is better than it is today? So I'm going to start with you, and tell us about what you see in that area, and then Kalpit, I'd like you to kind of weigh in as well.
Okay, so I think I'll probably end up talking about the Dreambox experience, but before I talk about that, I think it's worthwhile to impress upon people how gigantic this market is and how there's no one-size-fits-all solution for any segment of it. It may well be a much larger than $600 billion market for all I know, and globally it certainly is. And so, it's one of these kinds of markets where there's room for all kinds of different entrepreneurs doing very different things, and in fact, very competitive things. And if I could answer the question you asked a few minutes ago about how to get started for just a second, I don't think there's anywhere near one answer to that question. We had one path that we took, but I think probably the advice I would give entrepreneurs is look at how you can innovate as you're getting started, as opposed to it's a pretty rare case where you develop a product and you take it to market and you're successful and you make $1 billion and things like that. Usually you have to throw out the first 5 or 7 products or whatever before you actually figure out what the recipe is. So look for channels that allow you to innovate. So specifically around personalization, I think is really what you're asking about. The Dreambox approach has been, well, what if we can use all kinds of data, right? The data that we can collect using information technology to personalize the educational experience for students. And so, a great example is that we teach math, elementary school math, and if a student is working on a particular skill, and we've had 1,000 students in the last year who also went down a similar path to work on that skill, we have a pretty good idea of how that student's going to perform and what direction that student should take in the future. That's a data-informed path, and it's a path that's personalized to her. And it's an absolutely transformational experience for the kid, because it's like they have their own tutor. It's like they have a great instructor sitting in a chair next to them. And that's been our philosophy and where we're going.
Yeah, so Dreambox has this orientation which is very much about individualized learning. I look at this student and I cater the experience to their particular skill, capability, and progression. Kalpit, what would you say from your point of view?
So I think mobile devices, they are revolutionizing education as I see it today. Like one of the most interesting things I did in school was I dissected a rat, right? Now, one of my dreams was to dissect a human body, and I could never do it. Today, using mobile devices, we have one of the application called drill down anatomy. So I can start with your skin, muscles, skeleton, nervous system. I can literally drill down. I can grab the parts, do drag and drop. So I think there is very interesting thing once you look at the touch, once you look at the interactivity that mobile devices offer. For example, we are working on an application for momentum. Like how does a ball collides, and so these devices have a gyroscope, they have compass, they have accelerometers, you can touch them. Some very interesting things are possible, and the most important thing is, like, if you look at what Newton did, is he asked a question, like why does an apple drop to the ground? And I believe mobile devices, particularly tablets, they can raise the awareness, and more students can ask the question like why, how, and really go inside deeper levels of knowledge. So I literally see devices, particularly tablets, as transforming education.
So those are two great examples of, I'm imposing words on you, but perhaps more self-directed learning or self-enabled learning, where I can kind of work atomically as a student and learn. I wanted to ask you, Tara, about maybe a different angle to that.
Yeah, I mean, the words or the term blended learning is used a lot, and from our perspective, blended learning isn't just about being able to have online video access as well as in classroom access. It's actually a combination of also extremely personalized pathways, as well as group-based pathways, as well as some people will call it differentiated instruction, not just personalized learning. There won't be one thing, and even in one classroom, there's going to be different ways of grouping. In fact, we were having a conversation earlier today on there's so many different ways you can think about grouping students, and you also have to think about not being discriminatory inadvertently in trying to figure out what you're going to group students by. You have all this data, so we've got to be kind of careful also. If you have something like address, and you start grouping kids by neighborhood, do you inadvertently go down a path that's actually not such a good one? So you can certainly group by proficiency, you can group by the path that they're on, you can group by other things that you might know, but you also want to be able to group by interest. We know that kids also learn socially. Not only do they learn in a specific individualized path, but two kids who are really into music are going to be able to find a way to understand a concept if you can get them together in a group in a way that two kids are going to about sports or some other things. In fact, one of the features that we're working on is, in addition to augmenting some of the data that we can get from the SLC technologies that is more strictly demographic, we know that teachers have sticky notes, that describe all of their students, including these kids are friends, these kids are foes, or whatever kind of random pieces of data that they normally collect. But that's really useful for grouping. So if we can help electronically capture that as well, we can help teachers make those grouping decisions so that they can then assign the right personalized pathway either for the specific individual or for the group or for the class as a whole. All of those pieces are important because there isn't just one answer. And where some kids are going to fall behind in proficiency in some parts of a topic, sometimes they'll race ahead too. So you don't want to necessarily only keep them in the same groupings all the time. You have to dynamically regroup on a regular basis, and that's asking a teacher to do a lot. So there had better be some tools to make that really feasible in some interesting way.
So I wanted to talk about something slightly different at this point and ask a couple of you this question. If I were setting up of the education startups in this room, how many of you are .coms? Just a couple. So most of you, are the rest of you .orgs? How many are .orgs? Just one or two. Okay, so I'm curious. So I'll ask Sandi first, then I want to ask Stephen. What do you think? What's the better way to go? If you're going to organize
You're specifically talking about for-profit or non-profit.
Yeah, I'm talking about should you be a, amazingcooleducationsystem.com or .org?
It's an interesting question.
Well, I'm thinking if you're entrepreneuring, you want to know which URL to buy, right? So, or you buy both, but if you're picking the one to call yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So this is not a Washington STEM reflection. This is a personal reflection. So that's my disclaimer. So when I did my startup, I went back and forth because my background was that I was a high school chemistry, biology, mathematics teacher for a long time, and then I started a company. And I really felt like my heart and soul was at .org, right? From a public school teacher, nonprofit is the only way to go. But to get angel investors, they wanted it to be a .com, and there we were. And frankly, the challenge that we always had was, I think this is changing now, but there was a lot of suspicion in the education community about .coms. You just want to come in and make money off of our children or our teachers, and that suspicion is there for, in some ways it's not very rational, because I'm pretty sure that textbook companies have made a lot of money off of educators for a long, long time. But it's just the way it is. I think I had some credibility built in automatically because I had been a teacher and I had walked the talk and been in that classroom and faced that challenge. And so I think that's changing now. And so I think sometimes in order to get investors, depending on what you're trying to do, there are going to be people who are more attracted to a .com simply because that's the way they're going to go. I think there are others who say you can do excellent work and sell great products and do great things, and you can be a .org now. So,
Stephen, will you fund .coms?
Absolutely. We currently do. Oh, sorry. I'd say absolutely we currently do. We don't, there is, to Sandy's point, I do have colleagues who are suspicious of commercial ventures. It's an odd meme, but it is there, and you can understand why. But it's an issue that's too easily demagogued. At the end of the day, what matters is whether or not you're dialed in to what the educator is trying to accomplish or the child is trying to accomplish. It doesn't really matter what your organizational entity is. One thing I will say as a foundation, and in my group at least, we look for evidence of, is self-sustainability. You are managing a business, whether you're a non-profit or a for-profit, and you better have a model, a financial model, that has a path to sustainability, because at least within our group, we're not in the business of funding in perpetuity. It's not a healthy dynamic. Customers send signals about what works, and the sooner you're dialed into that, the better from our perspective, whether you're a .com or a .org.
Great point. So I have one more question, and I was hoping that you might have questions that you can just yell out and we can kind of argue about.
Can I answer the previous question?
Absolutely.
So I can't imagine not being a .com. I accept that there's .orgs out there, and that's great, and they're all doing wonderful work. But in building technology startups, I can't imagine how I would hire the right people into a nonprofit. I don't know how to compensate them, just because that's the expectation that they have. And the other thing is, as much as a pain in the butt as investors are, right? They really do kick your butt and make you move forward. And there's not always as much, let's say, butt kicking going on if you're a nonprofit.
Well, that's a great point.
I'll push back on that one a little bit. I think it is possible then, but it requires, if you're a .org, you have to be, in some ways, more transparent in terms of the results you're delivering and the success you're having. So I think about Khan Academy, that has at times been in a very public conversation, and increasingly public conversation, about whether or not these videos and exercises have any impact on a child's learning. And to the team's credit, they're not shirking from that debate. In fact, they're doing everything they can to demonstrate steps they're taking to be more effective and to provide evidence of outcomes. But I do agree with you that the dynamics are much harder if you're a .org. But I can imagine some scenarios where it's possible to be a .org and still be effective.
So I certainly don't want to leave the impression that .orgs are not good. And they can be very good, for example, the one you said. And the other thing I think I'd say is, I've never seen, I'm sure it exists, but I've never seen an example where a client didn't want to do business with .com.
Yeah, I think the challenge with because I would agree with you. It's easier to think about forward progress as a .com, just because I think you're more attuned to the commercial feedback on whether or not what you've delivered has any value at all. And then you're not clouded by, but it was good, and it had value. It's like, yeah, but it wasn't measured. Did you actually get the commercial feedback? So I think I think it's easier to make forward progress as a .com because you're looking for that validation in a very concrete kind of way, and it's simplified to some extent.
So in my world, I don't look at .com or .org, I just look at mobile apps.
In fact, that kind of single-mindedness is probably how you create success, right? Are there any questions from the room? I have a few more, but I'd love to get your thoughts. Yes?
I did want to get back to that last question. I mean, would you say the landscape is changing though, with Khan Academy, Coursera, edX, all of them getting funded very handsomely in spite of being .orgs?
Well, I mean, is the landscape changing? I don't know. None of those businesses, even Khan, which has, Stephen can probably cite their traffic numbers, even Khan, which has very high traffic, doesn't account for any sort of percentage of the education market yet. And this is a gigantic market. So it's great that companies like Coursera and Khan are having success. I mean, there's lots of space there.
I think there is a shift afoot. I will have to see where the market bottom sort of settles down. There were headlines today that roughly $1.1 billion has gone into edtech startups in the first quarter, which is an extraordinary number by historical standards. It's probably a bit of a peak. We'll see where it settles down. But there have been interesting phrases that have been creeping into articles in the mainstream press. The New York Times had a recent article on MOOCs, the MOOC phenomenon, and profiled Coursera. And some people are nodding, so obviously read it. And it used an unusual term for venture capitalists, which was patient capital. And the notion, it was actually quite striking that the Coursera team were asserting that at least their backers were in it for at least the next 10 years, which is a very surprising statement. It's an encouraging one because it can take that stick-to-itness to really succeed in the education space. It's also worth noting that Khan Academy is on a funding round right now that's aiming to raise multiple hundreds of millions of dollars, in part because they don't want to have to keep returning to the marketplace, where we sort of have a difference of opinion over the wisdom of that approach. But it's symptomatic that there is an appetite out there on the part of funders to invest in education, and at least early signals that they are somewhat attuned to the uniqueness of the education space and the fact that it might take a little while longer to see a return that might not in fact rival what you might realize in other spaces.
Yeah, I mean, certainly even the way we're funded is not necessarily from a traditional technology point of view. We're privately held. We're not a publicly held company because we think that it's important to have patient money in this space. So, our owners are patiently in it in a for-profit sense, but they're not beholden to strict VC timelines of having to show what the return looks like. And for this market, that's critical.
One of the things that's interesting about education, it has a very high multiplier if you can gain traction. So there are millions of students available and millions of parents who want to buy resources for their students and millions of schools that do as well. So there were other questions?
And I would just because you're looking for I think you're looking for some practicality, and I might have been insufficient. So on the right at the seed level, you have companies like XY Combinator that are willing to pony up a few $100,000 to help you get sort of to a proof of concept and slightly beyond. Other groups like the New Schools Venture Funds that will then step in to take you to the first $1 to $2 million. So there is a more evident ladder that you can now climb as a startup. In addition, the government has encouraging programs like SBIR, the Small Business Innovation Research Fund. I don't know how they came up with that name, but that will offer up to $2 to $3 million, in some cases more, to startups, and they actually have a fast track for minority-led businesses, which again is encouraging to see, and it's by government standards it is relatively fast track. It just takes a couple of months to get an answer back. So I think it's easier now than it has been in the past to at least dip a toe in the water and determine if there is an interest there to back your business.
So there was a question right there. So it's actually the guy behind you, and I'll ask you the next one.
Go first.
Oh, so you go first.
Well, one of the things that kind of interests me so far is the absence of the conversation on the adult learning side.
Yes.
I mean, it's the adult learners who actually have the money, and ultimately the adult learners who actually pay for the other learners to learn. And ultimately, I think all of your models are built on adult learners paying for it, whether for themselves or for their children. So I'm curious about what's going on in the adult learner space, and in particular with the new development in videos, the educational videos, and the one that really caught me by surprise is Connect, learning through using Connect. Those two things.
So the question is, adult learning, what is its role given that adults tend to be the funders of much learning? And what about these new innovations like Connect and other things that are making a difference there? So I was going to start with you, Kalpit, because I know you do some work in this area, and then open it up to others on the panel.
Yeah, I think recently, if you look at lynda.com, they raised $100 million in funding, lynda.com. They're trying to solve three main problems, right? One is, do you want a job? If you want a job, you need to learn, let's say, iOS programming, Android programming. The second thing they're trying to answer is, do you want a promotion? If you want a promotion, then again, you need to learn some specific things. And third question they're trying to answer is, do you want to solve a specific problem today? So lynda.com has been in market for 17 years, very much focused on the professional learning. At WAGmob, we are trying to take a look at another segment of it, that is mobile learning. So mobile design, mobile development, mobile testing, mobile marketing, lots and lots of people are interested, and very few people have a clue. What is Windows development? What is Android development? What is BlackBerry development? How do you go about doing it? So there is tremendous opportunity, even if you just focus on mobile area. There is tremendous opportunity in design. Like, it's very scarce to find a good mobile designer, 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. You can make huge money if you're a well-qualified mobile designer. So within WAGmob, we are trying to take a step at can we go after mobile design, mobile programming, mobile development, and try to teach that with another mobile application.
So, Sandi, there was an aspect of this that I was wondering if you might talk through, which is you pointed out up front that it's not enough that we put energy into teaching kids. We should equally put energy into teaching teachers and enabling teachers to be better. How do you see this playing out as a marketplace? So that dimension of adult.
Well, I mean, I think, again, the landscape is changing, and we're expecting more and more out of what our kids should know and do when they graduate college and career ready. What does that mean? And we're getting clearer on that definition. I think we're clear that we're graduating a lot of kids who don't meet that definition as well. And so then suddenly, how do you close that gap between the, what we aspire our kids to know and do at the end of school and where they are right now? And we need to close that gap fairly quickly. I think we are going to rely partly on teachers to close that gap, and that means teachers are going to have to learn some new skills fairly rapidly. How we can do that using online technologies and other tools is something that we're actually working on right now, putting a pretty big focus at Washington STEM over the next 18 to 24 months, just to see. We have some partners who say, we'll experiment with some interesting technologies. I think video is a great starting place. I think most of us know that if just watching video made us really skilled, I'd be an awesome soccer player, and I'm not. So it's not enough to just watch something. How do you interact with that and use that as a learning device? And then also, how can we use some of these online technologies and other things to actually give people real-time coaching? So if I'm a teacher in a classroom, maybe you're watching me from another place because you're an expert, but I'm just wearing my Bluetooth, and you're seeing me and you're saying, hey, Sandi, that student just had a misconception of math. You need to go correct that, or wait, push that question a little higher, and then give some wait time. And you're coaching me in the job that I'm doing in the context of my work. And there's some pretty compelling research about that transfer of the skill to the workplace as, I think, one of our big gaps, that no-do gap, and how can we bring technologies and other resources to really build the skill in the workplace. And I think that's a really exciting place, and it's not just for teachers. We're demanding all adults have to constantly be reinventing ourselves and learning new things. and I think we're going to need to use
And
technology.
it sounds like, there's a lot of talk about cradles and graves earlier today. So you might think of this as being more cradle through careers, but not just singular, it's plural. And as you develop as an adult, you develop as well in your ability to have many careers, not just one. I would imagine every one of us on this panel has had at least a couple of different kinds of variations of life and work. So this idea of cradle to career, is this something else that, are you guys looking at this at all, Tara?
We're looking at it a little bit, but really our focus is on really more K-12 education and what it takes to be successful there. It's just a focus that we've chosen to focus on.
Yeah, I'm like to the gentleman, the best piece I've read to date on some of the trends in education have come from Clay Shirky, Shirkey. He's a professor at